thought I could clue in on it.
Brother
Here we go.
Jonas.
Brother Black,
How
how
you
are
doing
you
today, my
today?
good friend? I'm doing well. Thank you for
I'm doing
asking.
well, doing. Mhm.
Right on, right on.
I was just I was looking at the headlines today, and as you know, everything is in full swing with politics, and it made me realize that the lack of local headlines and what's going on locally in our politics. And I think that people have gotten such a disconnect because we keep talking about the national politics, but we really don't connect with what's going on back home and how important it is that our local politics be a part of the conversation.
Right. What would you say is one of the most important topics that we could cover here locally as it pertains to politics? Or first, hold on. Let me take a step back. We decided to name this pod or this talk, right? All politics is local, right? Because I'm on
Hmm.
we on the campaign trail, running for state
Yeah.
senate here in Kansas City, Missouri, eastern side of Kansas City, basically all of Raytown. And so on the campaign trail, I'm having a lot of different conversations with folks about all different types of things. And seeing is that we're kind of pioneering and cutting a new path here. Explain to people or break down to the folks with your expertise. You are a four-term state legislator, one of the youngest state legislators ever elected, and you pretty much know the landscape and what the importance and significance of people recognizing how local their politics is. Break that down for them and let them know why all of your politics is local and why you need to be paying attention to your local condition and your local circumstance, probably more than the national as it relates to politics.
All right. Let's break it down like this. I could say it becomes local because I began my political journey growing up. Uh, my family was a Democrat, and we're on this path, and we're taught that we're, supposed to support an ideology or a party, and then, but when I got to the house, my eyes were open to see that maybe the ideology that we were supposed to be wasn't really what I thought it was. And I began to learn that in order to politics is not just party locally, it's people. It's who you're putting in office. It's making the connection with that candidate. And like you, I found that the more that I make contact with people, that people are voting for a person locally. They're not voting for them. They want to know your is. They want to know how you're going to make their lives better. And when it's local, you're having a greater impact far sooner than you would as somebody on a national level. You know, uh, some of the local bills that, and when you go to the House, that has a direct impact on how your city is going to function, how your county functions, and how it directly affects how your daily life is going to be uh, in perpetuity. And when you in like and then knowing that, you've got to know your neighborhood groups. You want to know your now, and you've got to know online influencers, podcasters, and this idea that we don't have power. We've got to get rid of this notion in our community because we do have power. As you said, I was sent there 4 terms. And in those 4 terms, I was able to accomplish things with the support of my local community. Even though I had to fight the party that I was in, I was still able to accomplish the things I was able to because of my local relationships with the people. And that was more important. And they found, and that was news to me. Like when the party came after me, the people stood up and said, "We with you, Jonas. It doesn't matter about the party. We like what you're doing for our community. We support you." And so I think that that's most most eye-opening about local politics is that people support people, not just an idea.
Right. And I think that because of the political climate and because we have so much division in our community at the moment, it's really easy for us to be misguided and basically misinformed about what politics is supposed to do for our community. So could you break down, I mean, because again, I never want to overlook the amount of expertise that you bring to this process, right? And so a lot of the things that I encounter is I mostly encounter people that really don't understand the relationship that they should even have with their community as it relates to their local officials. And so break down how you tried or how you went about making sure that you stay connected to the community that you were representing, and how you held yourself accountable to the community that you were representing. And I think that would be important because again, with us having this disconnect about what we're supposed to get from our political officials and in the political establishment, I think that is hindering us and holding us back. So let folks know how you went about maintaining your relationship with your community and your constituency, and how it was effective for you in the overall situation.
When I was in office, I was always around. And in fact, I had to learn. I tried to make myself available to the neighborhood groups, and I was constantly visiting churches, visiting people, visiting places that I knew. I was going to people, and I was also inviting people to the Capitol. I once chartered a whole bus to have people brought down to Jefferson City so they could understand what was going on and why we had to participate in understanding that what that power means and how we do have power as a community. Because I kept hearing so often, oh, my vote doesn't count, or, I don't have this, what I do doesn't matter. And so I
And
tried to
brother Hughes,
bring them to Jefferson.
were you feeling a lot of, and I don't mean to cut you off, but you said something that is pretty important, especially right now, in this political season. You were trying to say that your vote doesn't count. I mean, I know you got elected as a Democrat, and there was a Republican administration at one point, and so speak on how you were able to actually work with Republicans, and basically describe how the whole notion of your vote doesn't count doesn't really fly when you got the right person in office.
It doesn't. And, when you got the right person, your vote is what gives you power. And as I said, the Republicans were able to see that I was able to bring out these numbers and able to vote and get voters. And so in their minds, that transcends to something like, this person is effective in their community. We need to work with them. And so they were able to help me pass legislation. Like, as I spoke before, we built the hospital, Samuel Rogers. We got that new grocery store built on Blue Parkway, that whole shopping area and the Sonic, the new fire. When they know that and I had to learn that Republican didn't mean bad guy. I went in and I had my eyes open, and I had to understand, like, educating them at the same time educating myself on, oh wow, my community used to be Republican. Like, I had to find and dig into the history of what the party was, and I found that my own party was not as supportive as I thought it should be in times. And so I began working across the aisle and getting things done, and they were doing that because they saw actively in my community. They saw that the people who would come up to Jefferson City, I was constantly engaging, and there was oftentimes battles between what was going on, which is good because, like, for instance, I was school choice long before it became popular. because I always thought that we should have our a person who is responsible enough to say my child is not getting an education. I want them to be able to get an education, and they have that right to move and do whatever. And so that thinking was very controversial then. And myself at a battle with those in my community, and it was the first time a split had happened. And so you find yourself then knowing the power of that vote, knowing who supports you in your community. And then back in Jeff City, they see, oh, he can muster this amount of people, because I had over 1,000 people come through Jeff City one time, and I gave them T-shirts, and I said, "We're people, not numbers," and I just sent them through the halls to make a point that, you know, the voice of the people will be heard and we will not be ignored. And so I had about 1,000 people running around, and a T-shirt said, "Hughes is for the people, we're people, not numbers." And that made an impact because I was able to connect with the people and bring that power to Jeff City. And that goes by being out, like this notion of I'm in office and so I don't have to talk to people anymore. I don't understand that. Your power comes from the people. And it could be said when I left office that I kind of took some steps back, but that's another thing. But in office, I think it is imperative that you're constantly communicating with the community, not just having events and things of that nature, but ideas and bringing back the legislation and what you're trying to accomplish, and showing them this is the economic environment that I'm trying to do, and this is what I need you to do to help make that happen. You know, I need you to email this chairperson to let them know that you're supporting me on this bill, or I need you to ensure help me get this letter writing campaign. Mr. Pastor, can you be sure that your congregation is aware that this bill is going on? And so it's so important that people have that direct connect and know that they can speak to their local officials. And not to say some local officials are very good at it and others aren't, you know. But I think that pipeline where people in the positions of power in Jefferson City know that people who do get out in their community, there's a real difference. They'll treat you. Your bills get to committee. You know, you get things to the floor. You have the ability to get things done.
Now let me just ask you this, because again, I one of the reasons why I appreciate you so much, man, and like you being involved in this process is because you always demonstrate the movement basically of what you have to do. You know, it's one of the things that I've come across and I've learned, you know, in my life, in my involvement is in politics, right? There's a notion that when the facts and the evidence change, your mind should change also. And so one of the things that I feel like I have experienced, you know, in my involvement in politics is that the narrative always stays the same. When we look at, you know, Kansas City in particular, you know, our city government is considered nonpartisan, but yet and still, one of the things that I've noticed is that there is a major Democratic influence when it comes to our city politics. There's a major Democratic influence even when it comes to our county politics. And so one of the reasons or one of the things I want to ask you, I want to put forward to you is, and for you to give me your thoughts and opinions on, is why do you feel that we have been stuck in basically the same narrative that hasn't produced the type of quality of life or the type of change that we feel that we should have had, you know, in our community, especially as it relates to the east side of Kansas City? Can you break that down, or not necessarily for me, but for the folks that's listening, or for the folks that might come across this podcast? Give me understanding of your expertise of why the narrative has consistently stayed the same as far as what we should be getting, you know, from politics in Kansas particular, because I know
Yeah.
that sometimes that we can speak on a lot of different things and a lot of different topics as far as policy is concerned. But when I look at Kansas City and specifically the east side of Kansas City, it seems as if we're always given the same rhetoric of, change is happening, things are changing, but yet and still we don't see those changes actually taking place over a period of time.
And that's because it's, as I said, it's because it's almost an upbringing. It's how a lot of us are raised, and it's a lot of the institutions in our communities who stick to this narrative. And if you're going to break
But John,
the
let me
narrative,
stop you
then
right
you
there.
sort
Let me ask you, what would you consider to be the narrative of East Side? Give me your narrative of the past 40 years of the East Side of Kansas City. I know it's probably a little bit
of,
above your years, but let me just hear you summarize what we've been dealing with, and also at the end, don't forget to let them know what we're doing to make these things different now.
yeah, and see, and that's the thing. The full narrative is lost because we can say Freedom Inc. Freedom Inc. began as a political organization, not as a democratic organization. Bruce Watkins
Hey,
and Leon were
remind
both
people when Freedom
leaders
Inc. was started. When was Freedom Inc. started? Break or give us a little
in
history about Freedom Inc.
1964. Yeah, 1964. Dr. Swope, my grandfather Leonard Hughes, Rosemary, God bless, forgive me her name, Rosemary and Leon Jordan and Bruce and Sterling Bryant all came together and they formed Freedom Inc. because they wanted the black community to have black representation. Because until then, we did not have elected officials representing our best interests, and so that we had to then take a step back, and that's when Leon Jordan and Bruce Watkins understood that politics is not just emotion, it's strategy. Bruce Watkins was a Republican through and through, as was the majority of the black community until 1964 because of the civil rights. We were Republican because Republicans freed the slaves. And so Frederick Douglass was an instrumental part of starting the Republican Party. And so, but as time has gone on, we sort of drifted away because the narrative, as you said, began to change. And the narrative has begun to be that at some point the Democratic Party began to be like this supporter of the black community and that it was our caretaker. But yet I found myself challenging this notion when I got to uh, Jefferson City that it's not necessarily the party, it's the person. Once again, if you step out of line and you don't do as the party says, then you become an outcast. And not an outcast, but I'll just put it to you like this. I was told that I couldn't be a Democrat anymore by
Oh
another
wow.
brother from St. Louis who said he went to file for senator, and they said we're not going to let you be a Democrat. And he said, "Say what?" And they said, "No, we're not going to let you file." And he said, "What?" And they said, "Well, don't worry, we're not going to let Jonas Hughes file either." Now I didn't even know this brother, and so he comes to find me, and I find him. He says, "Did you know you couldn't be a Democrat anymore?" I said, "No." And so I said, "News to me." And so that year I went and filed Republican. And the irony is that the Republicans had been big supporters of me throughout my time in Jeff City. And it was a struggle to come to terms with that because the narrative I had been brought up with is that Republicans were not for my community. Republicans, not, you were a sellout or you had to give in to this idea of what they were. But when I found is when you're a good politician, you get to define your lane. When I am here locally, I am defining my narrative. I am telling you, this is what I'm doing in Jefferson City for my community. What my party may do, I need to fight for my people and my community. And so being and having to come to this understanding and realizing that the narrative, the local narrative, is not just we can't be emotional. We have to understand strategy and power. And if we've got a dominant amount of people on one side, then why would we not want representation on the other? Because they're not going to pass the ball to somebody who's not on the team. And by on the team, that doesn't mean that I have to, I believe something that's not best interest in my community. I am doing something that is stepping outside of so-called what's the norm because I've learned a new story. I've got access to more information and have a greater understanding. And I'm trying to tell you, trust me, if I've delivered this and done things in the past, then why would you not trust to follow me to the future if I'm telling you that we've got to do something different in order to get something done? Because if you can look
Right.
around at our community, see everything that's happened, it's the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You know,
Right.
and so it almost seems what we're doing. We continue to rely on one, and yet are we getting the result we want, or are we just getting promises that we always do? Yet when you go to the other side, you get results. Look at what Modest Miles has done with his church over on, in him switching and him, learning to be bipartisan in his approach to politics, and how much he has been able to accomplish by working with the Republican Party and working to do what's best interest of his community. That is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to understand power, strategy, and how to get this. And sometimes that means doing what's in best interest of your community, even if they don't quite understand yet.
You know, that's
And that's breaking that.
that's a interesting statement that you're saying when you're talking about doing what's the interest, or doing what's best, or doing the what's best in the interest of the for the community. It seems as if, it's always two type of mindsets that you can come across, when you're looking at that dynamic of doing what's best for the interest of the community, right? You have some people that say that they know what's best for the interest of the community, like right now, right? Kansas City, we are dealing with a situation where we are rapidly seeing more and more of a decline every single day. I mean, when I first started doing this stuff back in 2012, I had some very strange ideas about politics. Let me just put it that way. But I had a passion for actually wanting to see things change in the community, right? And so one of the things that I saw just even over the past, slightly over a decade of me being involved in this process is I've actually seen, us take even more steps back. And so one of the things that I wanted to say, or I wanted to get your thoughts on, right, is again, you see two type of dynamics that you can go about when you're involved in politics. One, you come across the people who want to do things for you, or two, you come across the people who are wanting to do things for themselves, right? And so I've seen in
Mm,
other situations in other places of the country, right, where they have a more of a do for myself mindset, where they were able to transform their communities because you had people go into the communities who are a part of the community, and they literally just put in their sweat and their equity to transform the community and to make the community a viable place where people actually came to live in the area, and they were doing it out with very little government help. As a matter of fact, I think that their interest and their focus was to demonstrate to the government, like, listen, we know what's best for our community. We want you to just get out of our way and let us have the opportunities to be able
exactly.
to do what we need to do for the interest of our community. And so, like, right now, I just want to get your thoughts on, the if you Google, like we were talking before, Google some of the things that are happening in Kansas City. And right now we see the city actually ready to beg the federal government for more money to put a cap over a freeway that, in my opinion, does nothing for the economics for the city, nothing for the east side of Kansas City. And the only thing it does is give people a little green patch of land for some luxury apartments downtown. How do you feel about that, Brother Jonas?
And see, and this comes back to, when is the last time we've had somebody who has developed a full vision and presented something as a whole for Kansas City in terms of leadership? Because as you said, Kansas City, on one hand, we see that it has growth and it has things, certain projects that are happening, but yet in our community, that growth and that stuff, it always seems to stall. We get the promises and we get the, like, we get the support of a highway, when rather that, or they always talk about our community, like, for instance, like, we have to build low income housing. Like, why can't we just build housing? Why are we not just allowing people to support having businesses, and support in this idea of that the black community constantly needs, like, this sort of, oh, we know what's best for you, just kind of let us guide you mentality that comes from the Democratic Party, rather than allowing us to establish the economic establishments that we need, so we can know what we need to do in our community and allow us to make that happen. Instead of having that $450 million bond, for a highway, or I forget the amount exactly that's always put there. Why are we not fighting for those same bonds and those same things to create economic development in our community, so we can create the engines of change that are necessary, that alleviate a lot of the problems that we're constantly discussing, instead of, talking about, crime all the time. If we were able to have support more small businesses and support more of the growth, then we would see people with able to have give them jobs, give people access to opportunity. If we were once again able to have the sports teams and have these things that were once in our community, and it was a thriving community, it created a narrative that the black community has always been like some sort of like the hood, but it was a neighborhood. It was a thriving neighborhood, in fact. And the numbers show that going back 34 to 40 years
it
ago.
wasn't just a thriving neighborhood. It was a self-sustaining neighborhood. I mean, every time I do a little bit of research about 18th and Vine, I'm always amazed how the dollar circulated within the community over 8 times. And when I look at, and I know, because I know a little bit about Freedom Incorporated myself. And so when I look at the time in the era of Freedom Incorporated, it would seem as if, to me, one of the reasons why they were able to be so effective in the community is because the community was so self-sustaining. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I would agree 100%. That was a tremendous part. They had, even we talk about Freedom Inc., both of the leaders were business owners themselves. They both
Right.
understood the necessity of economic independence, and they both understood that empowering and creating the businesses and creating the neighborhoods that we all could live in was essential. It was back then. There was the dentist living next door to the garbage man, or the gangster living next door to the lawyer. It was a real neighborhood. It was where people. It was a community that had, as you said, the dollars and everything circulating within it, and they once we had almost, I would say, the integration idea, it kind of separated what we had in our community, because it then became this focus on we're trying to prove ourselves to other communities rather than accepting what we already know. We know what we are capable of sustaining. We know what we are capable of doing. Just give us the means and the access that we know other communities have, and we will get it done ourselves. Historically, we have already shown it, and we prove it time and time again. And so if I've got to make a switch to get over here to make sure that my people in this community, or to prove that I'm a leader of people, period, that we show that we're at the table, we are not asking you what's going to happen next. We have ideas on how to take it to the next level because, as is shown throughout this country's history, without struggle, there is no progress, and yet we continue to progress throughout this struggle. And so, if we are going to prove and change this narrative, then we have to continue to show our leadership by daring to do things that others dare not do. And that's being freedom of mind, freedom of understanding the economic necessities of how we need to uh, take that next step. They put a lot of our entrepreneurs in jail. Hey, we've got to change that because in
that's one of
30
the things
years
that I was
ago,
about to. That was one of the things that I was about to say, brother Jonas. It seems if we have become way too comfortable, right, overlooking an element of the community that has been absolutely essential. Because just like you said with Freedom Incorporated's initial founders, two of them were business owners, right, meaning that they were entrepreneurs.
mm-hmm.
I think that when we get too far and too caught up into the socialist rhetoric and the socialist dynamic, basically we're willing almost to just to give up our entrepreneurs, to give up the movers and shakers. Maybe that was one of the reasons why we had no qualms with locking so many of non-violent drug dealers and incarcerating them for decades and taking away their whole family and destroying their lives, because we don't necessarily care for the entrepreneurs as we should. But it just amazes me how in 2024, we have so much language that seems to be revolved and related around socialism and how we are so willing to allow government control as opposed to highlighting, individuals, real individuals in the community that are getting things done and making things happen. Like you even said with Pastor Miles, what Pastor Miles has done on 27th and Prospect with his ministry and the creation of the ancillary facilities that actually go to support the church. The church is amazing. So how do you feel about us, neglecting the role of the entrepreneur in the community for us basically relinquishing control to the government?
I think that is something we've got to change. We don't, when you get in, I constantly have to remind people, when we get in that office, that is our power. We've been given the power to create and do. We're no longer asking, we're dictating terms. And when we are creating and understanding that we are trying to do what's best for our community, and we mentioned these entrepreneurs, but yet nobody says anything about CVS and Walgreens having the lines just as long on the 1st and the 15th, and they get dividends, and those drugs are somebody, being pushed and forced on somebody. And so this war on drugs and this war on everything that's been a war on poverty, we've got to begin readdressing how that has gone wrong and what we need to do in order to fix and right what's been happening in our country in the past 30, 40 years. Obviously, the approach is broken. When prison is a profitable industry and you've got more people locked up than China and Russia in a democracy, we're doing something wrong. And people can argue that, they're a scourge to the community and this is that's happening. This is not anything that's new. What we're doing is not offering those people a different opportunity to have that skill set and give them economic means to do it, rather than have particular that product. I've said to some people when I went and spoke to a prison before, I said, if you can sell rocks, you can sell socks. They understand the economics of supply and demand. We've just got to give these people another chance, another shot, and quit defining them by what their narrative is and understand we are writing our own story in our community now. We're taking back our power and saying, no, this is what we're defining it as. You don't understand how things work around here. We do. So let us write our own policy and our own legislation to fix it and to help take steps forward and to make a new era in our community. Just as like what that's why you're taking the chance to do what you're doing on the side, because you understand the power of being in control of your economic destiny.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why, I'm always trying to bring the economics of the economic reality to the forefront is because that's really what all this is about. It really amazes me sometimes how, for the longest our path and our journey, again, it goes back to the time where 18th and Vine was a thriving, self-sustaining community, because one of the things that we instantly understood coming out of slavery is that we have to change our economic situation. First, we have to become literate, we have to become educated. And so through that educational process, which is a individualized process, everybody has to get down and get into the studying for themselves and lift themselves up as
Yeah,
far as it relates to your consciousness, your knowledge and understanding. And then once you've done that, the individual typically can come together and practice group economics. And so you don't necessarily need the government to tell you to do these things. It was one of the things that we kind of understood intuitively. There was a book written
it
by
was self
Herbert.
instilled.
Say again.
I said you're right. It was self instilled. It was
Self.
known in the community that we were going to have to take care of us. Because I didn't mean to cut you off, but education, we
No.
had even our schools such as Sumner or Lincoln that were black institutions that they took it upon themselves to raise and have expectations of their students. And some of those people who came out of those schools, which were public schools in at these times, but they become national leaders, out of KCK and out of Kansas City. It was an expectation within the community that the community had for itself. It wasn't what someone outside the community was saying. It was coming from within. And now, please go ahead. The book you were mentioning, yeah.
No, I was just saying. I believe it's Dr. Herbert, or the author was Herbert Gutman, and he did a study, basically demonstrating the black family during the time of Reconstruction, and just really what was the focus of the black community during the times of Reconstruction, and some of the things that I always find to be totally at odds then, as opposed to now, is that we were more connected when it comes to family outside of slavery than basically probably than we've ever been in this country. Like the amount of people that were trying to seek out and find their family and figure out who their family was, it amazes me. And then when we see that in today's time, the practice of staying together for the purpose of performing group economics, it seems to just been lost. When we were more of independent minded and independent spirit, we had the understanding that if we all play our parts in all of our specific roles, and we develop in those specific roles, then we can be an asset to one another. And it even follows along with some of the work that Professor Glenn Lowry has put out when it falls along the terms of social capital. When I know that Brother Jonas is over doing things over in his side of the world, and we have a relationship with each other, and that I'm doing things on my side of the world, well, you doing this, I'm doing that, we come together and we make an exchange, right? And that's when
Yes.
you start to
Mm-hmm.
see the dollar flowing in the community. I know a lot of people can say what they want to about the Jewish community, but some of the things that the Jewish people practice amongst themselves is superb. When you talk about
Sure.
having the
That's why that
understanding of
community
making
thrives.
sure that I'm going to give business to my brother first, and give business to my sister first, and then she's going to basically reciprocate, and you see the type of wealth that's generated within that community, and they're a small community as well. So I don't think that it's even logical for us to say that, there are elements outside of our community that are holding us back, as opposed to the elements that are inside of our community holding us back. What do you feel about that, Brother Jonas?
And I think you're 100. I think you're on in there because people forget historically the black community had a relationship with the Jewish community. when a lot of them were fleeing from the Nazis in, during World War II. They were coming, establishing in the Black community and opening businesses and teaching us things that the other communities were not trying to teach us. The sustained dollar within the community. They also were teaching at our HBCUs and teaching banking and economics and things of that nature that they were withholding from us from other universities in that nature. And we began to learn and gain more access, as you say, to knowledge, because that's what it's been a fight for constantly, is a fight for information and education on what we know to be achievable, and we see it outside. And then when we try to replicate that, as we have throughout history, from Black Wall Street on down to Chicago being founded by a Black man, these little things that are forgotten throughout history because they change and they twist the narrative within the community. There's been a sustained attack on the family in the Black community. I think it was Thomas Sowell wrote a book about it, in that, the numbers are directly correlated, where in the 60s, it was almost 87% of the families in the Black community were two-parent homes, with a job and support, and they were actively economically sound. And then now we find the exact opposite today, where it's 87% are not two-parent homes, and they're not able to economically support themselves, and they're having to reach out for this help, and so, and making us having to depend on outside sources. And so we've got to understand that there has been, it's in politics, when you can get into it, all of it, and you talk about socialism and you talk about all the isms and everything, man, it can get diabolical in a way of control, in the way they can keep and hold their foot on a community. And so when we've got people who are willing to step up and break out
or George Orwell called it double speak. When you talk about that diabolical nature. Yeah, because the double speech is pretty diabolical, man. I mean, a good friend, good mutual friend of ours, Brother Faulkner, we were having a conversation earlier this morning, and he was like, think of what the term reproductive rights actually means, or what are they actually saying when they say reproductive rights? Like, having a baby is natural. Stopping a baby from being born, that's what you're actually doing. You're actually talking about stopping people from having babies. You're not talking about reproduction, because reproduction is just naturally having a child. When you're actually talking, but when they actually speak in the terms of reproduction, they're actually trying to tell people that we don't want you to have children. Wouldn't you agree?
And think about this, they've actually got us so focused on one aspect of healthcare that we're not even talking about the whole healthcare system. We've been talking about women and women's reproductive rights instead of saying, okay, yeah, that is one particular part, but the whole system needs changing, not just that aspect of it. But they've played on our emotions to such a degree that we're not even thinking about how people can't afford to get dialysis. Or some people have to, they're choosing between, they got to get their medication, they got to get their meals. They can't afford to get a prostate check. They can't afford to constantly have these just checkups, not just physical checkups. Even today, we've got us the mental health aspect of everything too, because 1 in 6 Americans is suffering from something, dealing with something that is mental health in some way, and able to say anything about it, because again, instead of arguing about the status of mental health or in health care, we're just talking about abortion constantly. And abortion is just one aspect of health care that we really need to be discussing. And we've done enough discussion on that, and we have to discuss how can we make an entire system of healthcare where that maybe that isn't such an option all the time. Maybe we're not talking about that all the time. We're discussing a healthy populace, and we've got to branch out and remember what happened to the discussion of universal healthcare. they've managed to take it all the way down to one topic that is just an emotional topic, rather than, we're not even talking about the economics of it, as you say. We're just talking about something that is dealing with, an emotional aspect, and that's very private to somebody else and not healthcare. We're not talking about doctors that won't see people, or emergency rooms that are backed up for hours, or in some hospitals now they literally scan everything they bring in your room. These hospitals have become health corporations rather than providing health care. But no, do we talk about that? No.
And
What are we talking
not
about?
only have they become health corporations that don't provide health care, they're actually health corporations that have a monopoly that are trying to protect their monopoly. And basically, anytime you're allowing for the monopoly situation to occur, then that means that the people in general are the ones that are paying the most for a expensive product already in the first place. So of course, when it comes to the
Yes, that they
to the
control the
price. Right. So when it comes to the price of actually trying to access healthcare, then you've already priced a whole significant number of people outside of the market, because or in Kansas City, Missouri, in the healthcare situation in general, your healthcare is either provided to you by your employer, or you have some type of government sponsored healthcare. And so even when we look at that, that's how somebody's paying for the healthcare, but we don't even understand how people can even have access to the healthcare that they need in general, because we're still looking at a supply and demand dynamic where you are literally restricting the supply of physicians and people who are actually able to take care of the people who need the help, because of so many
Yes,
different regulations and so many different policies and loopholes that people have to jump through. Like, there are approaches to healthcare and into the healthcare delivery system that have been taking places across the world, that we literally see third world countries have greater life expectancies than we even have here in the United States, and especially on the east
and
side of
that is
Kansas
so
City. Because
very
when we start to compare the east side of Kansas City to any place in the country or any place around the world, we're always in a lower bracket of effectiveness, than anybody else.
and that disparity. And it is because too, like my step grandfather Samuel Rogers, they originally began Samuel Rogers Health Center to be a hospital in for the east side of Kansas City. And as Swope Health, these places are supposed to provide medical care, not just places where we're sending them to and then you're referred to someplace else. But then again, we've allowed policy to become dictate, where doctors now, they're so afraid of litigation and other things that they often cannot even practice medicine as they would without the protection of these corporate benefactors now, who do have lobbyists, and they've been writing these laws and they've been doing these things to the point where some doctors, they don't want to practice in America. I mean, it's not even the idea that they can become wealthy as a doctor anymore. They're working to pay off debt, and they're working inside these corporate machines where they're employees now. And then their mandate is not to even provide the best health care. It's to patch somebody up and move them along. They we've we've let them commoditize too much of us as people in this country. Like, I get wanting to be wealthy. I understand wanting to have money, but at some point, when do we put the future of our nation and the people ahead of profit? You can have profit with purpose, and as you said, on the east side, when we're allowed to do these things and have economic control, you get more of a balance. Because when you go towards socialist systems and things of that nature, that's when you see things fall out of balance, because you cannot predict the nature of a free market or free will. It has to be able to adjust in incrementally happen. And that happens when people are able to say, oh, I see this service and I can provide this need. Let me have access to this money, and so on and so forth. Am I not? Am I? And that's economics, right? Am I saying that right? You know, because as a politician, then I have to listen and I have to have the wherewithal to go down there and say this is the legislation that I'm putting forth, and I've got to convince the 33 other senators and the 164 other representatives that this policy is what's best for Missouri and what's best for my community. It's best for us as a nation going forward. You've got to have people with a vision going into office again, not just people trying to scare the out of you and just make you angry and confused. But I literally, like, say, give you hope. JFK promised to put somebody on the moon. When was the last time we had somebody, a president was like, damn, we going to the moon? That made you want to support somebody. Now we talking about immigration as an issue. Well, we're a nation of immigrants. How can that ever be an issue? And so it's, as you said, we've got to be careful on these narratives and understanding that we as a generation can tell a story too. How long are we going to continue to let the older people define what they think should be, when we can see, obviously, y'all got it wrong? You know what I mean? If everything is going wrong and y'all refuse to help set it right, then when are we going to step up and accept responsibility as you are, in saying, look, I'm putting my hat in this public service ring, which is not an easy thing to do. And I commend you, brother, and especially having the nerve to be a Republican and do it, because they'll try and say that, oh no, he's not this, that means that, when it's none of the above. It's actually trying to be a catalyst for change and make that change happen.
Right. Nah, I appreciate that, brother Jonas, because that's one of the things that have been on my heart and mind, man, for the past, like I said, more than 10 years, is how do we ignite the true spirit of Kansas City and get that and get past, just being caught up in the emotional rigmarole, for lack of a better terms, and actually allow and actually to allow our spirit, man, to start to engage our intellect to where we can start, envisioning a structure for ourselves, that will be vastly different than what it is that we've been given before. And the thing that always, gives me pride and actually gives me hope is to understand that we have one of those communities, that could be considered like a Tulsa, Oklahoma. I know we probably didn't have it on the scale of Tulsa as far as the type of resources that we had at our disposal, because, of course, Tulsa, they got natural resources. They got oil, they got natural gas and all those different things. But to understand the notion, or to understand the fact that we were able to do some of those same incredible things in the Black community here in Kansas City, Missouri, because we built that off of entertainment and basically hospitality, man, that is pretty exciting. And I think that we lose a lot by always jumping over the component of what art has actually done to our community. One of the books that I've been reading lately is a guy, man, his name is Stephen Alexander. Stephen Alexander is a astrophysicist that talks about, the different dynamics of the physical universe that we live in, right? And how it is so fluid. And it's so fluid, and we have to be very innovative, and with our thought processes in the way that we want things to go, because those things can happen. Those potentials are there. And so when you look at the historical significance of Kansas City and where we've actually come from, it actually gives me excitement about the future. Now, I know it's going to be a lot of hurdles and a lot of things that we have to, break through as far as the mindset is concerned. But when we look at the fundamental building blocks, the spirit of Kansas City and entrepreneurship and business, it's almost a cornerstone in the Black community. So I really appreciate you, with me on this journey, man, and trying to revitalize that and bring that spirit back to where it needs to be.
It is. And then I want to speak to again too, and this is where again we're talking about local politics, because
Right.
I remember thinking, like, when Trump switched from Democrat to Republican back and they told me in 18, when I couldn't be a Democrat, he jumped party and he had the idea that he was going to be Republican, and we see the results of that. But we've got to let people understand that, when you're in a party, you can still define yourself locally, and you can still have your own priorities locally and deal with what you're trying to do. So many of these, because they see so many politicians these days who they aren't politicians. And if you got to have somebody who say and gives you a list on what to do, and 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 you're paying them to tell you what to wear, you ain't a politician. You somebody who's playing dress up. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so when but when you got somebody who's got a vision and got a mind, and you're trying to achieve somebody using public service as the tool that it's meant to be, you can accomplish great things. And that's why we're asking people, sometimes I need you to stick with me on this local level, even if I understand what's going on nationally. Locally, we can build from here with these small starting blocks. You know what I mean? With this foundation, we can begin our own change. But unless we're in the game, and we're working to be a part and create our lane and do what we need to do, then we're gonna keep having the same results. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the same results, and that's what we get constantly, and they want to blame everything on us. I've never ever understood how a minority can be the majority cause of everything. It doesn't even make sense.
Right.
It fundamentally doesn't make sense, but they wish
Right.
for us to carry the burden of everything. I'm done. I'm not carrying them no more water for anybody else. We got enough to do, and
Right.
so it's like it's leaders like you who are willing to dare and willing to take that chance to say, no, 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 no. This is how I'm going to do it, and on your own journey,
Right.
you come. This isn't something like people on the outside looking in can easily make assumptions. But when you're in something, and you come to these conclusions, and you can share with each step of the way, like, this is how I got here. I'm not asking you to trust. I'm asking you to vote for me. That's what I'm asking for, that vote for. I'm asking you to vote for me and vote for my vision as you are, because you have a vision for the 9th district that you want to see self-sustaining economic growth. You know the history of where your city is, and that is why you're taking this chance and doing it something different.
Right.
You
Brother
know,
Jonas, we done been on here almost an hour. So you want to wrap it up with some closing remarks?
I would like to thank you for having me, and I look forward to speaking with you more, and hopefully and broadening more minds. Because what we're doing here is we are being the change we want to see. We're defining a whole new idea of what we're trying to get people to understand. There has never been anything like us, because now getting here to this point. And so you can't define us by what comes before, because we're here now and we're defining a new future. And so just stick with us, and you continue to listen to us as we continue to come forward, we continue to march forward. And Brother Derron's gonna lead the way on his, and I'm here to do the best I can to share more ideas, and let's try to make some new happen.
Hey, listen, Brother Jonas, man, I appreciate you again, man. I already know we got a lot more work to do, so it definitely makes me feel that much more better to know I got somebody like yourself, man, with me in this fight and this struggle. And I want everybody to make sure, man, that you go to the website and donate just $5. Just $5, man. That stuff will go a long way when it comes to us running this race here on the east side of Kansas City for State Senate District 9. We got a lot of folks to talk to, but we also need that $5 so we can keep the materials and we can keep the type of things that we need to keep people engaged in this process. So please go to the website, D Black for Mo, donate $5. And if you are around the Kansas City area, go to my Facebook page and sign up for the event that's taking place. It's going to be a meet and greet with me and Steve Hinton on August the 14th 15th at 5:30 in Raytown. So please don't forget to go to the Facebook page and sign up for that event if you're in the Kansas City area properly. And also, last but not least, just like and share. And if you want to, please leave a comment and we'll be happy to engage with you. I know I'll be happy to engage with you because this is a collective thing, it's not just an individual thing. And so, Brother Jonas, you got anything else before we close it out?
No, sir. Thank you for having me. And
all right,
we'll keep on keeping on. Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll talk to you in a minute. Thank you.